Follow the money. That's what author Michelle Malkin has to get the truth behind the assault on our southern border. And what did she find? Powerful forces at work trying to undermine our country. Take a look.
If you want to know what's behind the caravans of illegal migrants surging toward the U.S. border day in and day out, follow the money and find the truth. That's what conservative commentator and author Michelle Malkin says in her new book, Open Borders, Inc., Who's Funding America's Destruction? Malkin follows the money trail, tracing tens of billions of dollars spent or received by more than 400 nonprofits, charities, lobbying groups, and businesses raking in tens of millions of dollars while promoting mass, uncontrolled immigration. Open Borders, Inc. reveals the powerful forces Malkin says are working to destroy America as we know it.
Well, author and commentator Michelle Malkin joins us now from Denver. And Michelle, welcome to the 700 Club. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be back.
Listen, this book, you've done an exhaustive study of the whole matter. Let's talk about what is the game? What do these people want to accomplish by these open borders?
Well, when I say follow the money, find the truth, that is my investigative mantra. And unfortunately for many of these groups, not only domestically within the United States, but around the world, when they talk about welcoming the stranger, what it's really about is financial profit. That is what's driving this, the money motive. And many people around the world are involved in what I consider a human smuggling racket globally. So when you have groups like Pueblos Sin Fronteras, for example, which came to the public's attention when these illegal alien caravans started really laying siege to our southern border and escalating their activity when President Trump took office, you have to look at the provenance of groups like that. And it does trace back to one of the most notorious figures of Open Borders Incorporated, George Soros. He has created an entire network and an infrastructure of nonprofit left-wing groups that operate in a highly partisan manner to sabotage our border and to obstruct immigration enforcement. There's also an electoral imperative. For the Democrat Party, this really is about securing a permanent ruling majority. And for many of the multinational corporations, it's about importing as many low-wage foreign workers into our country as possible.
Let's talk about Soros. He's a Hungarian. I understand he isn't even accepted in his own country. What is his game? He's a super rich man. Why does he do this?
Well, Pat, he has earmarked $18 billion out of his $25.2 billion net worth, which he achieved as a hedge fund manager. And we don't have to guess about what his agenda is. I read very carefully a book of his called The Case for Global Governance, and he makes clear what he wants. Sovereignty, he said, not only of the United States, but pretty much every Western industrialized nation, is, quote, an obstacle to global governance. And this is really about is a few choice oligarchs wanting to use the United Nations and other transnational organizations as their vehicles to claim power over the right of every sovereign nation to exercise its self-determination. In large part, it means sabotaging our southern border, and you see that. But it's not just about illegal immigration. It's about controlling who we determine gets into our country, what numbers they are, what traits they bring. And through the Refugee Resettlement Program, which is the pet project of the United Nations and George Soros, what they're doing is redistributing the world into our country.
All right, Michelle, you pointed out in Mexico, they have standards totally contrary to what these globalists are talking about.
Yes, so I talk about an entire shelter network that's been propped up by many of these non-governmental organizations, many of them with what seem to be very benign intent. For example, Doctors Without Border or Save the Children. And unfortunately, there are a lot of social justice hijacked religious organizations, and I pinpoint the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops as among the largest profiteers in all of this. And I am a Catholic myself, it was rather painful to document how billions of dollars are are being made by the Vatican in order to ship millions of people across the southern border and fill their pews and their collection plates. But I think it's very important when you listen to Pope Francis, who has anointed himself one of the leaders of the anti-Trump resistance, when they talk about their mission to, fulfill for faith and talk about compassion. For them, really, what's at stake is billions of dollars of tax subsidies as well, because the refugee resettlement racket, for example, has poured billions of dollars into the coffers of the Catholic bishops and many of their sub-organizations, many of them which trace their roots to partnerships with some of the most radical figures on the left, for example, Saul Alinsky.
All right, let's talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center. You have a whole section about them. Talk about them.
Yes, the Southern Poverty Law Center is a Soros-funded organization, which I consider to be the most ruthless and efficient smear machine against conservatives, Christians, immigration enforcement patriots, and pro-lifers that has operated for nearly 30 years. Even some liberal journalists have talked about the fraud that's perpetrated by this group, which redefines their political opponents' free speech as quote-unquote hate. So they put out this hate map. They put pretty much every effective Christian organization on that list. I've been in their targets and sites for the last 20 years. And what they do is try and deplatform the most outspoken and effective spokespeople for American sovereignty, for the role of religious liberty in our lives. And they have teamed up with another Soros-funded organization, the Council on American Islamic Relations, to do everything possible to essentially criminalize the free speech and peaceable assembly rights of people on the right.
Is anybody joining you in this? Well, you say the ultimate game, as I understand from Soros, is to eliminate borders so there can be one world government and to take away the sovereignty of America. Is that the ultimate game that they're trying to play?
It is. Fortunately, we do have a commander-in-chief, President Trump, who went to the United Nations and called these people out. He gave one of the most significant speeches, a muscular defense of American sovereignty 2 weeks ago, and it was drowned out by many of these same Soros-funded organizations which have posed a resistance movement to conservatives for 20 years now. And this is why you see all of this impeachment palooza. It's to distract from the most important existential policy question of our time. Are we a sovereign nation or a sanctuary nation? And you see all of these stories in the headlines about these elected officials and police chiefs who are protecting illegal aliens, who are subverting the authority that immigration enforcement agents have. The Abolish ICE movement is also funded by Soros, and people are joining me. In fact, over the last 3 weeks that I have been on the book tour for Open Borders, Inc., thousands of people have turned out for Stand With ICE rallies that I'm holding. It is not just about standing with immigration enforcement, but for law enforcement in general. Many of these same forces that oppose immigration enforcement have been the biggest cop bashers in American politics for the last 30 years.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being with us. The book, ladies and gentlemen, is called Open Borders, Inc. Who's Funding America's Destruction? Michelle Malkin. Is available where books are sold. And you'd find it very interesting. It's extensive. The research is unbelievable.
She does her homework.
She really does. Terrific reporter.